those who have the least. Through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. Say the Lord's Prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come. Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those that trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen.
This House is in session. Minutes for the meeting held on Tuesday, 16 June 2026 to be deferred. Honourable Leader of Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg to move that the aforesaid minutes be deferred.
The question is that the aforementioned minutes be deferred. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. The aforementioned minutes are hereby deferred.
Announcements by Your Honour. Messages from His Excellency the President. Petitions, papers, government notices, private members' notices, notices of questions, report from select committees. First reading of bills.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move the first reading of the Protection of Depositors Bill 2026.
The question is that the aforementioned bill be read a first time. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it.
Statements by ministers. Congratulatory and obituary speeches. Personal explanations. Motions for leave of absence. Oral replies to questions. Notice of motion for adjournment of the House on matters of urgent public importance. Orders of the day.
Honourable Leader of Business.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move the suspension of Standing Orders 6, 16, 18, 20, 42 subsection 5, 43, and 44 for the remainder of the day's sitting.
By the second answer.
The question is that the aforementioned standing orders be suspended for the remainder of the day's sitting. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. The aforementioned standing orders are hereby suspended for the remainder of the day's sitting.
Government business is the issue order of the day.
Public business is the order of the day.
Order number 6, sir. Enabling the Honourable Minister of Finance to move the second reading of the Protection of Depositors Bill 2026.
Honourable Member for Christchurch East Central.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I rise to pilot this debate very clear that the one thing that every time I've met with the Barbados Credit Union League, they've asked me, sir, what is the status of the provisions to include credit unions and ordinary Barbadians under the system of protection. And so, as I stand here this morning, sir, I want to acknowledge in our presence the President and some of the members of the Barbados Credit Union League who've come here this morning in spite of the fact that the Caribbean Confederation of Credit Unions Conference is being hosted at Wyndham to follow through on the very positive public pressure placed on this government to close, I think, what is a significant loophole in our financial architecture. And so I want to thank them publicly, sir, through you, because they have been steadfast in their advocacy for this piece of legislation that would allow ordinary Barbadians who do not have bank accounts and have their resources deposited in the credit union system to have the same level of protection that currently exists, sir, for those who have bank accounts. I also want to acknowledge, sir, the CEO of the Barbados Deposit Insurance Corporation is also here this morning, because this is work, sir, serious work and protection that I really hope, sir, that we never ever have to use in this country. And you would recall, sir, and I, as a young man, recall hearing of trade confirmers, sir, and the impact that that had on thousands of Barbadian families. And at that time, sir, in the early 80s, there were no such protections for those depositors. And therefore, I believe that this is part of how we ensure that there is adequate protection financially for our ordinary citizens who work hard every day across every industry in this country. They do so honestly, sir. They work hard, and it is important that we also include them as part of this process. And so I'm very pleased this morning, sir, to lead this debate, because it speaks to an act to make provision for the protection of insured depositors, enhance public confidence, sir, and continue the stability of the financial system. Now, a little bit about the BDIC, sir. BDIC, Barbados Deposit Insurance Corporation. Many Barbadians know of the central bank, many Barbadians know of the Financial Services Commission, but very little do they know about this institution, which really, sir, is important for many reasons, because should there ever be a failure of a financial institution in this country, again, sir, that accepts deposits, this piece of legislation that we are piloting today would allow the Deposit Insurance Corporation to ensure that it has in place a regime that would allow persons to be paid out up to the insured threshold for the specific institution, that would allow for a seamless as possible transition thereafter. And so the BDIC, sir, coincidentally, sir, an act of Parliament 20 years ago was laid in this House, sir, in this House. It became operational in 2007, but as I indicated, sir, only covered persons with bank accounts. And I regret, as I said, that it has taken 20 years, and I know that these last 8 years, every time I've met the league, sir, they have been on me, Minister, where are we, when we can get this protection? We've gone through a range of consultations. We've had some technical assistance by the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation from the United States, sir, to come in and help us ensure that the business case with respect to the protection for credit unions was solid. I know that the league, sir, they have been in robust consultation with their members to educate and to assist with respect to where we see the future of the credit union movement in Barbados. And we've already seen, as a result of those consultations, some credit unions are already starting to consolidate. And the consolidation, sir, is intended to strengthen the balance sheets of each of the credit unions, because as you would appreciate, the financial ecosystem is becoming more and more dynamic, and it certainly is this government's intention to have the credit union movement play a more central role in the Barbados economic recovery and transformation, and therefore the type of dynamic management and funding arrangements that we need to put in place. And I know we can't speak of future bills, but I'm just laying out the policy intent, sir, such that at the conclusion of the work that the FSA is doing, we will anticipate that the credit unions now will be full partners in the development of Barbados and not be seen, sir, as the outside children, sir, like some might wish them to be. I pause at this point, sir, just only to raise the very simple point that when the Shamrock Credit Union was started in 1947, sir, and you and I, sir, coming from our neck of the woods, know Shamrock very well. And people know about the Roxy supermarket now, but the Shamrock, sir, as you know, was a staple in urban in urban Barbados. And at the time, when it started, sir, saving amongst black people in the country, literally, sir, the legislation, because obviously once people started to believe that this thing was possible, legislation then was passed in 1951 to bring regulation to how credit unions and how poor people, sir, should save their money. And there was a specific requirement then, sir, that meant that the credit unions had to deposit, sir, part of their savings into banks, which has remained to this day. And I think it is important to say to Barbadians that part of the reason why we have to unshackle some of these colonial vestiges is that the movement has developed leaps and bounds. We want them to be incorporated with respect to the full impact of the economy, and therefore this bill in part will help change part of that equation, whilst the review of the full suite of legislation will seek to remove some of those requirements that still exist, allowing us to be able to drive more innovation within the credit union sector and allow for full participation in the financial system. And so this bill, sir, is about protecting the savings and deposits of all Barbadians. So because currently, sir, we have in place a system that is bifurcated, divided, where only commercial banks and Part 3 deposit-taking institutions have coverage since 2006, technically 2007 when it became operational, and leaving out the credit union movement, sir, that ordinary citizens who, over time, have had issues either getting a bank account, sir, and therefore worked with the credit unions to be able to be included. And so this bill is intended to expand the coverage with respect to deposits such that every box is ticked as it relates to our financial system in relation to where deposits are to be protected. And so we feel it's important that, having done the work, the League continues to work and advocate amongst, consult with its membership, that the timing within which we can not just bring this piece of legislation, but as we roll out more and more financial tools to innovate and to bring our economy in line with what we want, sir, for the 21st century, I think it is important that this is undertaken. I know that in spite of the growth in the assets of the credit unions, which has been significant in certainly the last 20 years, that this specific piece of legislation and the coverage which we will provide, sir, and government will I will get to that a little later, government will put in its little piece as well. I know that there will be greater confidence in the credit union sector, and therefore the opportunity for further enhancement of their services, opportunities for more partnerships, I think is going to be important, sir. And therefore, I anticipate that as we have just embarked on the modernization of our payment systems through BIMPay, that there's something called, sir, the velocity of money, which is going to mean that things are going to turn around a little faster, and therefore that turnover in of itself, sir, is going to generate more assets, deposits, and therefore our ability to see greater financial inclusion, but I think particularly intended growth within the credit union sector, I think is something that will come leaps and bounds along the way. So as I said earlier, sir, in 2007, the credit unions had assets of roughly $403 million, and at the end of 2025, it was $3 billion, sir. And so you can see the significant increase in just 20 years of the assets of the credit union sector, to the point now that it is almost 20% of the total deposits across the financial system. And therefore, it is not insignificant or inconsequential that we have to ensure that we cover those who represent the 20%. And those are many of the people that we pass out there in Marhill Street, sir. The vendors, the barbers, sir, in our communities, some coconut vendors, small business people utilize services through the credit union movement, sir. And therefore, right across the length and breadth of Barbados, this inclusion of credit unions in the deposit protection system will actually enhance and give greater confidence for those persons who every day come and make deposits in the credit unions. And just the other day, one of my constituents, sir, sent me a message, just like how when I saw the president and his members a few weeks ago, asking again, when will this thing happen? And so I'm happy today, sir, to come here to lead this bill that honors a commitment that we gave in June of 2018. I remember, with your permission, sir, Mr. Haynes was the president then, and I remember the conversation very well at LASC when we were all meeting as part of the social partnership, sir. And from then till now, Mr. Haynes and now Mr. Kamabat, sir, have been on me like white on rice to get it done. It's taken a little longer than we anticipated, but timing is everything, sir. Timing is everything. And so it's important for the people, and I think the League needs to be commended for its very, very strong advocacy in wanting to have this coverage, sir, in place for many of our constituents, for thousands of Barbadians, almost 220,000 members of the credit union movement, sir. And therefore, I feel proud to know that we have worked together to be able to put not just the legislation in place, and I know it has to go to the other house, sir, but that we actually have the competence and the expertise within the BDIC, the Barbados Deposit Insurance Corporation, not BIDC, sir, BDIC, so that there's no confusion between the two. We have the competence there, sir, and now we have technologies that would allow for these resolution exercises, sir, to take place. Now, sir, we have within this legislation as well, sir, made a few changes, which I think is important to highlight, because the previous legislation, sir, and the current threshold for insured savings, sir, is $25,000. That is actually written directly in the current legislation. And $25,000, sir, 20 years ago, I mean, $25,000 is still a lot of money, but it certainly was a lot of money 20 years ago. But today, as we've seen, and I know my colleagues here certainly can attest, 20 years ago when they only had $403 million in deposits, and now today they have roughly over $3 billion, they can attest that not just the rate of increase has changed, but some of the balances are quite robust, sir, in those credit unions that they have. And so we will be reviewing the threshold, but I want to make the point, sir, that internationally, we have a couple of benchmarks. Internationally, you tend to try to cover deposits within a 90 to 95% range, sir, because you want to make sure that you have the widest possible coverage with respect to deposit insurance. Each institution pays into the deposit scheme, sir, the premiums to make sure that the funds can be built up such that BDIC can discharge of their responsibility should an event happen. And therefore, it takes some time to build these resources up in order to have the resolution up to the threshold that persons can be comforted that should there be a failure, that there's somebody waiting, sir, the gatekeeper, or at first slip, so to speak, depending on your perspective, to be able to provide some comfort, sir, should a financial institution fail. And therefore, we've made a few changes to the legislation, modernized it, because as you and I both know, sir, under the existing system, sir, piece of legislation, if all went well, according to plan, sir, the minimum period within which you will get some money from BDIC would be 3 months, if all went well. Which means, sir, that from court to lawyers to institutions to everybody, sir, that if everything went well, the best case scenario would have been 3 months. Worst case, 15 months of things got drawn out, we believe, and we feel that certainly within the context of today's economy, that certainly is not a timeline that we feel will give anybody any comfort, especially, sir, given that with the failure of CLICO, which took 10 years to resolve, sir, at this point, we could never, ever entertain any institution failing, far less having a resolution process that takes 10 years, far less 3 months, far less 15 months, sir. And so we have done a couple of things that I believe will help us to ensure that, one, as we continue to monitor the growth of deposits within the entire financial system, that we will have a review every 5 years to ensure that we are still meeting the benchmark of at least 95%, but if it's between 90 to 95, then it's okay, but to make sure that you're meeting that, so that as people, as the economy grows, as businesses expand, as individuals, sir, earn more money and make deposits into the financial institutions, in this case, into credit unions, sir, that the coverage level will move upward to ensure that as many accounts and as many people are captured within the threshold for providing deposit insurance. And so that's one of the key things that this bill will introduce, which is unlike the previous bill, sir, that we will be repealing, that every time you had to make a change, you would have to come back to Parliament, sir, and do a debate and all of that, when really and truly, sir, this is really financial innovation and dynamism taking place, and therefore the regulatory environment needs to be sufficiently fluid that allows the BDIC and its members, which now would include credit unions, to say to the depositors, the members, we have increased your coverage, and therefore you can continue to deposit with us knowing that there is some protection there for you in the event that there's a failure. Now, let me make a small point here, sir. Our Central Bank of Barbados and the Financial Services Commission, sir, work together to ensure that the financial system, but particularly all institutions that accept people's deposits, sir, that the appropriate regulation and capital that is required for the orderly and efficient running of these institutions, those things are in place, sir. They continue to be in place. But we have to accept, sir, that we still operate in a world that calculates risk, and therefore nothing is foolproof. There's nothing that is risk-free. And therefore the financial system is there and the regulatory system is there to ensure that we monitor exposure. And by exposure, I mean, sir, that when you lend people money, sir, that you have done the appropriate due diligence, the appropriate checks, the risk management to make sure that within normal circumstances you will be repaid. And that you are not lending to every airy-fairy idea that just people pop up in people's minds without any substance to suggest that there's something real that you can touch and feel, sir, in relation to the ability to pay. And therefore, I know that over the years, people have perceived that credit unions are becoming like banks. But you and I both know, sir, that where we put we money, when the day comes, if they can't answer to us how they've lent our money, sir, within reason, and explain to me how we can get back my money, sir, and yours, it ain't gonna go down so good, sir. And so that fiduciary responsibility, that ultimate responsibility that the management and the boards of the credit unions, in the same way that the banks and the Part 3s have to say to their shareholders, and the truth is, as credit union members are the shareholders, then ultimately explaining to them why you have to go through a little more scrutiny to ensure that when they lend your money, sir, that there's a 99% probability that you will get back all of it in time. Because there's always a small, things happen, sir. Things happen, so it's not as if things don't happen. But you want to have confidence that your money is being managed prudently, responsibly, and that you will get back a rate of return that I know that credit unions still continue to pay on their deposits, unlike with the banks that removed the minimum deposits a few years ago. And therefore, that is all the more reason why people should continue to have faith in the work that the credit unions are doing, because by lending our money, sir, out into the real economy, to real people, to real businesses, not saying that the others aren't, but you're giving your members, your shareholders, the people in Mar Hill Street, sir, people in Wotton, people in Bushall, sir, a rate of return on their deposits because you are lending into the real economy. And therefore, this piece of legislation is important to signal to ordinary Barbadians the need to continue investing in credit unions. And therefore, as credit unions become larger, there are now, a couple of them are described as systemically important financial institutions. And so they're so large, sir, that if something happens, I know that all 30 of us in here, sir, can get real questions from our constituents. And therefore, I don't say this lightly, because in the same way that if something happened to any of the commercial banks, sir, we will all get the same questions, because these are Bajans' deposits in these financial institutions. And therefore, it is important that the regulators work collaboratively with the league and its members, that gives every single Bajan, sir, the confidence that this is the path that assures them, sir, a decent rate of return, and that the inclusion of the credit union movement now fully into the operations of the Barbadian economy, fully untethered from some of our colonial vestiges, sir, that we would allow ordinary Barbadians then to take a little more responsibility through the collective structures that the credit unions have in place. And so this bill allows for some of that, sir. Now, in addition, sir, what we intend, and this is where the utilization of technology now will come in, sir. So every 5 years, we shall review and make sure that we are providing the adequate level of insurance given the size of deposits across the system. Banks, Part 3s, credit unions. Once that is determined, sir, then the communication between BDIC and its members will go out to say, well, their premium was X, now it will be Y, because we need to make sure that we have the coverage. And the truth is, sir, the credit unions doing their own internal monthly assessments and monitoring would know that this is coming down the pipeline, because obviously by investing more in the economy, more money is coming into the credit union movement. They will have the ability to track what's happening at the individual level. You and I, sir, have a joint account, and therefore our balance in the joint account, sir, whilst we will not tell the public how much we have in our joint account, the reality is that we too can be covered in there. So no matter what type of account you have and with whom you have it, sir, that will be covered. And therefore, again, it allows for further expansion and innovation within the credit union sector, because we are making provisions not just for individuals or individual businesses, but joint accounts to be covered within this legislation for credit unions. So they're no different from what exists now with the banks and the Part 3, sir, and therefore it is important that that is said. Now, having said that, sir, just to be clear, if you and I have a joint account, sir, at a particular credit union, it might just so happen, sir, that you might have put in a little more money than me. But for all intents and purposes, sir, if something was to happen to that financial institution, then it would be deemed. You know the definition of deemed, sir. You practice this all the time. It will be deemed, sir, that you and I have equal share, because the resolution authority being the BDIC, sir, unless there's some written documentation that says that you got more than me in it, sir, and that is proved, at the point of resolution, sir, it's 50-50 between me and you, sir. And I will thank you gracefully, but the reality is that unless there's some documentation in place that actually identifies the structure, it is important to recognize that, as you know, sir, we are aging society, and as people age, they tend to put one of their sons or daughters on the account with them. And these are normal things that people do with the credit unions and everybody, sir. And therefore, it is important that people appreciate and understand that that is the perspective within which any potential payout will happen. But of course, we know that responsible Barbadians who are taking care of their elderly will use those resources to take care of their relative. And so operationally, as I said, I hope that we never have to use this piece of legislation. We continue to work with the regulators and the financial institutions to put the systems in place for monitoring that gives the public confidence about what we're doing, and therefore the financial stability assessment program that is conducted by both the central bank and the FFC continues. And as we introduce this piece of legislation now and they set up the framework for the credit unions to participate, then I will expect that greater monitoring, greater digitization is going to be important, because records will matter. If you want insurance, sir, it means you've got to provide information to be covered. And therefore, participating members will be required to submit the appropriate information so that we know, sir, exactly who, and this is information submitted to the BDIC, who are the account holders, how many you have, sir. And you and I both know, sir, that there are many Barbadians that have currently accounts at multiple banks, because they know that the coverage is 25,000. And if you're so fortunate, sir, to be in a position, people will have a little piece of money stashed away at different institutions, sometimes different accounts within institutions to make sure that their protection is broadened as much as possible, because at the end of the day, sir, an account holder is an account holder. And there's nothing stopping anybody from having multiple accounts with institutions. That is your purview and your right to do, sir. And therefore, I know some people do that. But the reality now is that we have a mechanism that will be in place that would allow for the automatic review every 5 years to make sure then that people don't necessarily have to be shopping around to do these things. And I anticipate, sir, that as the economy grows and our modernizing, our reforms haven't been modernized, would allow us to be able to deliver greater coverage for people. And so this is going to be critical. But one of the things that that is particularly significant, sir, is we are going to change the way that the resolution authority, in this case the BDIC, takes charge if there is a failure. So in this case, because we are talking about including credit unions, if the FSC made the determination that a particular credit union is insolvent, or the central bank makes a determination that a Part 3 or a bank is insolvent and needs to be wound up, that information being communicated to the BDIC stepping in, sir, as the liquidator, the resolution authority, now allows the BDIC, using the records that were submitted to it by the member institution. Our internal policy, sir, is to make sure that now that we have bin pay and the ability to pay in real time, and people can choose whichever bank they want, or credit union for that matter they want, to act as a custodian for the digital wallet, rather than having people line up at the central bank coming down there to get checks and sign papers and all of these types of things, sir. We'll be putting the mechanism in place to ensure that the records as submitted by the member institutions up to the insured threshold, which is currently $25,000, that the BDIC will be able to pay persons within 7 days, sir, to give certainty to what clearly would be a very extraordinary set of circumstances, because I do not anticipate, sir, any financial institution failing in this country, and it is not a highly stressed environment. Because one of the things you have to protect is against contagion, sir, in the rest of the system. And the one thing that prevents a bank run, or bank runs, credit union runs, is to ensure that the people who have been aggrieved, sir, and those who have not actually been aggrieved, see that there's a resolution to stop the bleeding and the hemorrhaging quickly. And so it is our intention, with the digitization of our payment systems, that within 7 days, that the BDIC will be able to pay people based on the information that was submitted by the member institution that may have found itself in trouble, into the designated wallet that the person desires the money to be paid to. And that is important, sir, because, as I said, I believe that 3 months in the current system, if everything went well, 3 months of pandemonium and people calling on brass tacks and on all types of things, sir, in a small country, creates a certain contagion, pressure. People then start to ask, well, what is going on with my institution? What's going on with all of that, sir? And therefore, we are changing the resolution framework to pay people within 7 days. But it does not stop anybody, sir, from going to court. because the BDIC, in being the liquidator, will be able to look at the remaining assets of the institution and then make a further determination as to how the monies, anything that might have been left over, would be discharged. And so, rather than get it tied up in court, sir, before money could pay and take a long time, we're inverting this process so that it stops the immediate hemorrhaging should the institution fail. People get, for the most part, because you're covering 95%, the aim, as we say, sir, is to cover 95% of people in the system. And therefore, when you look at those thresholds, if you're able to cover in whole 95% of the people, then it means then that the impact financially is diminished, and therefore people can carry on with their business as normal. And that is important, sir, because I witnessed, sir, in 2008, I think it was, or early 2009, I just happened to be walking, going past to my train station in London, and I saw this line, sir, and I thought it was a line for the train station. Except that when I walked a little further, I realized it was a line for Northern Rock, sir. And when you use the imagery of seeing people line up and witnessing a bank run live and in person, sir, at that time you would appreciate that in a large economy like that, with the ripples that caused was quite significant. And that has ushered in across the United Kingdom a period of very low growth because of some lack of confidence in the system. We too witness it here in Barbados because of the lack of resolution with respect to CLICO from 2009 till 2019 when we came to office, sir. And therefore, Barbados cannot go through anything ever like that again, because it has a significant impact on people's mental state, their confidence and trust in financial institutions, their trust in the government, sir, to find a solution, and therefore changing this modality with respect to if a financial institution finds itself in trouble and the ability to pay within 7 days is particularly important to allow for normalcy, sir, to resume as quickly as possible. And so I took the time, sir, to go through that because it is important that we understand that we cannot predict everything. But if there's one thing we must be able to give certainty to, is that if something happens, sir, that the BDIC will be able to discharge its responsibility within 7 days based on the data that is submitted by the member institution, which would allow affected members, in this case credit union members, to be able to receive up to the insured threshold from the BDIC because the member would have paid for the insurance coverage to deliver that particular relief. And so it is important, sir, that this bill pass, that the government, in the same way that in 2007, sir, the government of Barbados made a contribution of $1 million, sir, to cover as part of the initial capital for the fund that covers banks and Part 3s, that the government of Barbados, sir, is going to make its capital contribution, sir, of $1.7 million, sir, to kickstart the formation of deposit insurance, sir, for credit unions in this country, because we believe, sir, that there must be equity within the system, And whilst we are 20 years behind, that little extra is to make up for, for the time, sir. But seriously, this is what the government promised we will deliver for the credit unions and their members, sir. And I am happy to be able to say that we are very much in a better fiscal position than when you first asked me in June of 2018 to deliver this, sir. And therefore, we will work with the BDIC and the Credit Union League to ensure that the continued work to further modernize and reform the credit union movement, sir, that continues. And even before this session started, sir, there were a few very strong advocates in the gallery, and I will deliver on those things requested, because it is important that the full inclusion of the credit unions and your ownership structure allows us to empower Barbadians in a way that they have not been able to be empowered in the past. Now, sir, as a consequence, we will change as a consequence of this addition, we will change the board by adding, I should say, representative from the Financial Services Commission, so that there's definitely adequate sharing of information and surveillance at that level, sir, to ensure that we can continue the very strong work that the FSAP provides with respect to the monitoring of our financial system, sir. And to the extent that we will monitor the levels of coverage, should we be required to move faster than the 5-year period, we will do so. And therefore, it is important that as we continuously monitor what is happening within not just the credit union sector, but also on the banking side, and certainly the total financial system, sir, this is intended to make sure that the operational side of BDIC is further strengthened. Members will be required, as you do normally, submit your information through the FFC and certainly to the BDIC as you become members, so that everybody's looking at the same data. And as we modernize our systems, and I know the League has been working, as I said, sir, to make sure that there's a pooling of resources to support some of the smaller credit unions to help them digitize and get on the same platforms, that work really will continue in earnest, so that the kind of information that we will need to have, timely information, will be critical, and that the financial sector reviews that we continue to perform, sir, that the robust exchange and feedback between regulators, members, in this case, member institutions, but equally, I think, as credit unions, every year go and report to their members about what is happening within the institutions. I'm conscious that it is June, and usually those AGMs tend to take place in the summer, and therefore I would expect that they will be reporting very good success about not just the passage of this legislation, but what the BDIC has instructed them is necessary, such that the onboarding with respect to deposit insurance is in place, and that your members now understand a bit more as to not just the impact of the advocacy, but certainly what this means materially for the businesses that they operate, for the employees of said businesses who have accounts with credit unions, and that this process of building the fund now begins, but you have the appropriate coverage in place to allow us to be able to give them certainty in relation to their deposits with the credit unions. Now, sir, let me make the point here, because this is not now related to credit unions now per se. This is related to all and sundry that are involved in managing financial institutions. If, sir, you or myself happen to be a manager, sir, a director, sir, a CFO, or anybody that has a chairman, sir, anybody that has the responsibility, the fiduciary responsibility for managing financial institutions. If you or I, sir, found to be negligent, and we made different decisions that were not in the interest of the financial institution, sir, and caused the financial institution to be embarrassed, such that it becomes insolvent, sir, that leads to the BDIC having to come in and do a wind-up, then any money that you or I, sir, might have in there, we can't get none of that, because we would forfeit, sir, our right to insurance, because we would have contributed directly to the failure of the institution. And as you and I both know, sir, there's still a couple of court cases. I know you're not supposed to talk about things in court, but we want to make it clear, sir, that that will not be happening in this case. So anybody could go to court. As you know, sir, anybody could go to court. But there are provisions here to make sure that directors, senior people are in positions of responsibility. If you contribute directly to the demise of the institution, when the BDIC pays, sir, and we are, let's say, for example, sir, Parliament has a credit union, and you and I, sir, you're the speaker, I just happen to be the minister, sir, and the credit union goes belly up, sir, and you and I, as people in charge of the institution, sir, it goes belly up. Any money that I got in there, sir, and any money that you have in there, we cannot get anything from it, because if it is found that you and I were contributory to the negligence, then we can't get the money, sir. And I think that that's a reasonable position that most Bajans would accept, that you and I, sir, can't get our money out first and then left the rest of the people, sir, to flounder and suck salt, as we would say, sir, moving forward. And was, as I said, sir, you and I could go to court and let the court decide what happened. BDIC is not going to pay you and I, sir, if we were contributing to the negligence. And that is important, because public trust is key if we're going to have a stable financial institution. And as the credit unions continue to grow, and we will involve them more and more by removing some of the last few remaining colonial hurdles, that we will ensure that not just the management and directorship, but certainly the regulations around how we manage this through the central bank, FFC, and together with BDIC, allows us then to be able to drive this home, sir. And so it is important, sir, that the public appreciates that this is something that is happening in the background. The reason that most people in Barbados don't know about BDIC, sir, is because we've been able, as it relates to deposit-taking institutions, we've been able to keep a fairly tight ship so far. The government will continue to keep that ship very tight, sir, because people work hard to deposit their monies in financial institutions, and therefore it is important that we hold everybody responsible before things get to a point where there is contemplation of insolvency. And therefore, the same would apply as we bring credit unions. I mean, it already applies now, but as we bring credit unions into the insurance coverage framework, that collaboration will continue, and therefore it is critical that this be passed to allow us then to give ordinary Barbadians, as I said, sir, the confidence that they've asked, the confidence to continue to put their monies in the movement. And so this piece of legislation, sir, again, 20 years since its original passing, will repeal the existing act, sir. We will keep the existing orders that are in place, sir, to make sure as it relates to the banks and the Part 3 entities. And as we move forward, then the necessary regulations will be put in place as required with consultation with Central Bank, FFC, and the League to make sure that the appropriate onboarding of credit unions will be in place. Now, let me say, sir, at the outset that the current 25,000 threshold will cover 91% approximately of depositors in the credit unions movement as it is. If we move to 50,000, it will cover 96% of the members within the credit union movement. I anticipate, sir, that whichever number we choose, that once this is done and the framework is going to be put in place, the credit unions will come back and say, well, Minister, so much money coming, we're going to need to increase this coverage. And I say that not facetiously because, as I said, the digitization and our ability to have the velocity of money move faster in the economy by of itself will generate additional deposits within the system. And as I said, as well, the growth in GDP, as well as investment from outside of Barbados, I anticipate will be unlocked to be able to allow more deposits to come in to the system. And so we want to make sure that we bring everybody on par so that no matter whether you are in a bank, a Part 3, or a credit union, that everybody has similar levels of coverage. Of course, there's a cost for additional coverage, and therefore those numbers have to be worked out. So 25,000, sir, to start, and then we will monitor and make sure then that we get to the appropriate coverage level of 95%, both in the banks and Part 3s, and certainly as it relates to the credit union movement. But I am happy, sir, that having done, and let me say, sir, the credit unions League invested in ensuring that they had the appropriate research done independently for them to be advised. The government, working with the FDIC out of the US, also came in and worked alongside their consultants, and some of that work has already started to see, as I said, some of the consolidation within the sector. And therefore, whilst I accept, sir, that at the end of this, as we get stronger credit unions in place, sir, I know that numerically there will be less, but I think having fewer institutions but stronger institutions is really where I think the long-term strategic interests of Barbadians' savings, I think, will be best served. And therefore, the League certainly has been leading in that respect, and therefore, conversations will continue as to who merges with whom and all of that, sir. And I think that in the end, irrespective of one's perspective, the structure of any of those mergers, sir, are well within the purview of the League and the regulators to be able to determine, so that even if there are to be segregated funds within structures, that too is possible, and therefore it is not to be seen as a hurdle with respect to the future development of credit unions in Barbados. But the ultimate aim is to make sure that people are covered and that the manner in which we do so does not vary from the initial intent that credit unions were, the mandate that credit unions may have been set up to do, but you can do so in a structure that is sufficiently flexible that allows the coverage to be in place and to allow those principles that the credit unions share as individual credit unions to still to be preserved even within a slightly different format. And therefore, the government is very supportive of the League's leadership in this particular space because it is really members making decisions on members' behalf. And I think that it is important to signal that because the future, I think, of this country and certainly across the region, as I said on Saturday, is how do we allow credit unions now to work collaboratively cross-border, given the scale of investment that exists in the region. And therefore, as I said, as we remove some of those last bits of restrictions, that we genuinely, sir, open up for strategic investment across the region, credit unions working with each other, especially given that there are assets regionally that are really public goods, but they have commercial value. And we're always subject to persons looking for a specific rate of return, and when they can't get that rate of return, they always seek an exit strategy. And therefore, credit unions as long-term partners, strategic investors across the region, that is not to say that you don't want a similar rate of return for your members, but the perspective of a credit union in terms of the cooperative spirit is different from people who are looking for equity investment and the venture capitalists and those types of people that purely looking at the absolute rate of return as opposed to what it is that's going to generate wealth within the region, to stay within the region, and in this case, in Barbados, I think we have to make sure that we open up avenues for the credit union movement in Barbados and across the region to be able to participate fully in that. And this piece of legislation would allow our credit unions to be able to have more confidence and to work with other partners, sir, to ensure that we can get this job done. And so, sir, I am happy that my colleagues are here to witness the passing of, well, at least the piloting of this legislation. I look forward to the contribution of colleagues in this debate, but I think as one of the seminal moments in the Barbados Economic Recovery and Transformation Program, sir, I think delivery of this piece of legislation is perhaps one of the most groundbreaking with respect to how it will impact ordinary Barbadians and signaling the future for wealth generation in this country, and by allowing credit unions to have full and equal access, sir, into the financial system that allows its members, especially those who do not have bank accounts, to know that the confidence that they've placed in whichever credit union, that confidence now is well repaid, and that the longevity and stick-to-itiveness that they've demonstrated, I think, is now about to pay off. And so, sir, with those few words, I will beg to move, sir, that this bill be read a second time.
Honourable for Christchurch West.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, for the opportunity, the privilege to join this debate at this time. Mr. Speaker, I was actually in this honourable chamber in 2006 when, in fact, I see one other person. I was about to say I was the only person, but I looked further up this bench and I saw one other person. that was also in this honourable chamber. On the other side, we forgive him, but no on this side. No on this side. That side the bench, but this administration. And in fact, I think then Maskell, who piloted the debate actually at the time, who was also in this chamber in 2006 to see this, the Barbados Deposit Insurance Bill passed. And, Mr. Speaker, even at that time, all of us lamented that there was something missing. All of us lamented there was something missing. And I am so happy today, Mr. Speaker, to say that we have now completed what we started in 2006. And it must not be lost on us, Mr. Speaker, that it was the Barbados Labour Party in 2006 that brought the legislation, and it fell again to the Barbados Labour Party administration again to come and fix what was lost. Those 10 years of the Democratic Labour Party, those lost decade, they did nothing to help the credit union movement, but the Barbados Labour Party has come to make wrong things right for the people of Barbados. Yet again. And everybody across Barbados knows that the Barbados Labour Party handles financial matters better than any other party this country has seen. We didn't have any downgrades. In fact, we've had upgrades. We are a party that understands good fiscal and prudent management of its economy, and this is why we recognize that we had to come and fix what was left to be done for that 20% of the people of this country that were left out. But let me say something, Mr. Speaker, and let me break it down. When I think of this legislation, I think of Dolores in Sergeant's Village. Dolores in Sergeant's Village, Mr. Speaker, she's put down her money. First, she's put it in a little susu, a meeting turn. She's put the little $200. In fact, she's doing 2 meeting turns, so she could get 2 turns twice, two pulls. So she put down one throw, and then a few weeks later, she put down another throw from all the work of making the steam pudding and the sauce and the pickle and so on to be able to sell on a Saturday. And we don't sell on a Saturday, she sell at a reduced price on a Sunday because people want to get little pudding and sauce. And she put in that work in to be able to get that money. And once the meeting turn comes round, she goes to credit union XYZ and she put it down. And then the next 2 months, she go to credit union XYZ and she put it down. Because she's saving that little money for a rainy day to do little repairs on the house, to improve the cupboards in the kitchen. This legislation is to protect her. Because lo and behold, Mr. Speaker, you know, she gets about 23,000 or so, and then all of a sudden she wake up and open the paper and see credit union XYZ collapse for whatever reason. But she can be saying, oh, loss, all that work that I do. I lost all that money, all that hard-earned cash that I put there in XYZ. And look, XYZ gone and collapsed, no fault of her own. Well, through this legislation, Dolores could say, you ain't got to worry, your money insured. And after a period of time, you're going to get back your money. And that's what this legislation is about. Protecting the small man, the man that just got the 25,000, the 20,000, the 10,000, the 5,000, whatever it is, up to 25,000. And you heard the minister very clearly. If you've got more than 25,000, make a separate account so that you get that covered too. So that should anything happen, you might get a 50. If you're so fortunate as to get 50, you got 25,000 in one account, another 10 in another, you got full coverage. So I heard the minister. I heard the minister very clearly. And it's not only Dolores with her little account, because, Mr. Speaker, they also got the baker that he fortunate enough to have a little corporate account. But corporate accounts covered as well. Because it's not only the personal account that covered, because the baker, he a little higher than Dolores with her pudding and sauce. So he went and he got company. But his company covered too. And what he's smart though, he can got two accounts. He can got corporate account one in XYZ and another corporate account in, and I'm going to say COB, I'm going to say COD. I don't want to call the names. But should those credit unions, for whatever reason, collapse? Well, of course, we know if the banks collapse, you're definitely covered because that was the legislation that we passed in 2006. And it's interesting because I remember it even as a boy going into a bank in the United States, and I saw this sticker, FDIC. And you see it on the banks in the United States. You don't see it everywhere, but you see it on some. And I asked my father, what's this FDIC? What does this FDIC mean? He says, son, that FDIC means that if I put money here, then if something happened to this bank, and you know in America, banks, a lot of things that happen to banks in America. If something happened to the bank, you could get back your money because it's insurance of the money. And that is what FDIC, that sticker FDIC is about. Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, I believe that's what it's called. They have the sticker. We don't have the sticker here, I believe. I don't think we have the sticker. I think I saw a plaque up in a bank once that said it had the insurance, but they don't have the sticker on the door. But they actually have the sticker on the door. And this is an important piece of legislation because this nullifies this two-tier system. We in Barbados ain't want like a two-tier system that only the banks got the coverage and the credit unions ain't got none. We're saying no, and I am thankful and happy that today the Barbados Labour Party yet again has come and said, no, this is wrong, we need to improve things, and we need to get that coverage for everybody across the board. Important. Another aspect that I really like in the legislation as well, Mr. Speaker, which is different from what it was before, and something that we see in all legislation. Whenever you put dollar value in legislation, it's never appropriate legislation. That's the truth. And we all know it. Because dollar value over inflation, over time, the value of the money decreases. So therefore, in this legislation, when you have an opportunity every 3 years to come and review the levels that you set at, it is important. Because as the minister said, you don't want to be coming back to Parliament to pass another piece of legislation. You know what it is? Well, you know, and we know what it is. But the average person out there doesn't know the steps and the stages it takes and the cost to pass another piece of legislation. And what this legislation does is and I think all legislation going forward, we have to improve on it by recognizing that dollar values change, and we are inputting into all of our legislation mechanisms that the legislation itself will change dollar values over time by reassessment. And that is innovative, important, and a good part of this legislation as well, because it means then that over time the levels will be assessed to what percentage. Well, it'll be 25,000. Later on, as we continue to improve, and you see how great the economy is growing, maybe it might be 30,000. But it's good to start at the 25,000, and I appreciate the start at the 25,000, because if it were set higher, it would mean that the credit unions' premiums would be higher as well. So give the credit unions an opportunity to build up their own fund. I understand that the credit unions are going to have a separate fund than the banks. Fair enough. I'm not going to speak too badly about the banks, except one thing, because, you know, I have this reputation that I tend to cuss the banks. But I'm not going to say anything badly about the banks today, except one thing. Except one thing. And it is this. And I understand why people go to credit unions. It takes too long to get a bank account in Barbados. It takes too long. There are people and there are places and jurisdictions that you could get a bank account online in hours. And the banking, and I understand the know your customer regime in Barbados. But we have to do something about the time it takes to set up a bank account in Barbados. And this is something that the banks, the governor of the central bank, the Ministry of Finance, and all of us, the banking institutions, we have to, if you have to have a colloquium, the Prime Minister likes colloquiums, have a colloquium, everybody come in one location, say what the issue is, work it out, and solve the problem. Well, let's get the colloquium then. Let's find out what is it that costs us that amount of time to get a bank account in this country. There are other jurisdictions you get a bank account in hours, online, some places. We need to fix that problem. We need to find out why, what it is, what we need to fix it, and fix it. You know, I believe I would have spoken in here in this honorable chamber of trying to, my mother's getting on in age, 83, wanting to add me to her account. It took 9 months. It took 9 months for my mother to add me to her account. And bear in mind, I also have an account at the same bank. I have banked at the same bank from the time I was 8 years old. My mother has banked at the same bank all of her life, maybe, I don't know, 40 years, 50 years, 60 years or more. So they know me as a customer. They know my mother as a customer. All I was asking that particular institution to do, my mother was asking, is to add my name to her account, the joint account, the same joint account that the minister was talking about between you and him, to make a joint account between myself and her. It took months and months, months and months. And it's only because I was able to pick up the phone and call somebody I know in the bank that I was able to get it done. But what if I was just the average person that don't know somebody to call to get it done? And I told that person in the bank institution, this is not right. It's not right. Because imagine, and I understand, and I know the banks understand, why an elderly parent will want to add a child to their account. Because things happen. Things happen. My stepfather on the other side, he didn't have anybody added to his account. He passed away. The bank says, well, the only thing that we can help you with is paying the death fees. And other than that, that money got to stay in there till y'all can get letters of administration. And then you know how long it is. But these days, I understand it's 11 months for letters of administration. I hope we can improve that too. I hope, some lawyers here telling me it's more than 11. But letters of administration to get the access to the same bank account, that's another thing we got to fix in this country. You know, we came to office to fix problems. We got a former prime minister used to say, face it and fix it. So let's identify the problem, let's face it, and let's fix it. With this legislation, it's fixing one of those problems. No more two-tier system. The Lorries and the baker, their deposits will be covered should anything happen to the financial institutions. And I agree with the minister. Our financial institutions are heavily regulated. We've suffered the consequences of seeing what wasn't a bank or wasn't a credit union, but a collapse nonetheless. I saw when people was butting about trying to get their money out of Clicquot. I said in this chamber that the then head of that place, a man called Dupre, preyed on the Caribbean. Preyed on the Caribbean. And the amount of devastation and disruption that he wrought and that company wrought across the Caribbean must never be seen again. And this legislation, although it would not have covered them, at least it covers a section of the financial institutions of this country. So I fully support this legislation, Mr. Speaker. Another thing that, to further my point about the Clicquot, what this legislation also does is it has the legislation allows now the corporation to be the liquidation authority. And I thought that was excellent as well, because it takes it out of the judicial realm, certainly in the first instance. So that I would imagine that once there's a problem, liquidation can happen and people can get paid quickly. Not the problems that we had with CLICO, having to go through a whole judicial manager. And then the cost of you don't even know what the cost of a judicial manager is. Because in addition to the losses, you then have to pay the judicial manager as well to manage the liquidation of the company. All these things we have to recognize. This is why this legislation is good. It is appropriate for the time. And most of all, it is about the motto of the credit union, people helping people. That's what it's about. People helping people. The motto of the credit union, and one of the mottos of the Barbados Labour Party, better life for our people. And with that, I am sure this legislation goes a long way to doing that. And with those few words, Mr. Speaker, I'm obliged.
Honourable Member for St. Peter.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I don't think I'll be very long, but I thought I needed to. I seem to need your protection, Mr. Speaker. I may need your protection, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable, is a problem?
Yeah, there seems to be a problem on my side.
On the other side or on this side?
No, on my side, which is a challenge for me. But I had to join this debate because, actually, from a number of perspectives, my connection with the credit union movement goes back quite some years to my KPMG days. And we, in those years, audited a significant number of credit unions. We audited, I remember spending quite some time at an office in Maxwell, where a league was located at the time. But I also remember having to do, or being part of a team that did an investigation at one of the credit unions. And so that has stayed with me because it indicated to me that organizations, as large as they are, or as small as they are, have certain vulnerabilities. And so the matter of protecting those who could end up being hurt is one that resonates with me. But obviously, Mr. Speaker, it also resonated with me because I am a member of the credit union movement. And we don't advertise here, but I represent Spikestown, but I'm a member of a city credit union. I don't know if it's because I represent Spikestown. But St. Peter also has 2 credit unions located within the parish and within my constituency. If I walk for 10 minutes from home, I will get to a credit union because there's one in mile and a quarter. And so there is a closeness, there's an understanding, at least from my perspective, with respect to the fact that credit unions are the people's institutions. And that is really where I want to begin my intervention today. Credit unions represent the people's institutions. This bill today, Protection of Depositors, is a bill that in its essence says to Barbados that we have now moved away from addressing only the issues of the colonial era institutions, and we are now fully embracing the institutions of the people. The institutions that are birthed at the level of the community. Institutions that are the result not of some large investor with a lot of money who's setting up shop, but people who have decided to pool their money together, use the limited resources they have to build institutions that can be of benefit to them. And so the credit union movement is really the successor to what took place with the landship The credit union movement is the successor to the SUSU. The credit union movement is the successor to the meeting turn. The credit union is a movement with legitimacy because it comes out of the bowels of the people. It is the people's response to financial exclusion. It, because of that, has within it a certain capacity to be self-reliant because it comes out almost of oppression. We are not, as a country, where we ought to be yet because there's still a significant number of what we call the unbanked. And I hope that at some point the language can change from unbanked to something else because unbanked still leaves us in the colonial era. So we are still in the era, and I can call the name only because it is not here anymore, in the Barclays era. So there was a time when, outside of the SUSU or the meeting turn, the only financial institution was Barclays. We are now at the point where the people's institutions are not the poor cousins, but are now elevated to equality or to a certain level of equality with what we refer to as the traditional institutions. In this case, the traditional financial institutions. Now, I have always, as a member of parliament, and as a member of parliament representing the constituency for the Barbados Labour Party, to remind the public, Mr. Speaker, and to remind the House that it was the Barbados Labour Party under the late James Tom Adams, former member for St. Thomas, who in the late 1970s into the 1980s was able to craft policy that saw an exponential development in the credit union movement in this country. It was the Barbados Labour Party in government in a previous era that saw significant growth in the sector, in the credit union sector. It was the Barbados Labour Party in government through its policies that said to those who we sometimes refer to as ordinary people that these institutions are credible institutions. Now, I've said just now that they are the people's institutions, so they come with their own credibility. But sometimes it is important for officialdom to give that stamp of approval. That stamp of approval that says to people, yes, I understand that these institutions are good, credible, sustainable institutions, but I feel a little better recognizing that the organs of the state also understand that these are credible institutions. And so, Mr. Speaker, the matter of the state being able to say to the country, being able to say to the people that these institutions are institutions that we have, that we see as credible, and that we will supply some element of backative, as we will say, to. This bill is another step in that same direction, because offering protection to depositors in these institutions is another step in saying to those depositors, those owners of these institutions, the state sees you. The state understands that these are credible institutions, and the state is prepared to put systems in place that will further protect your investments in your institutions. Now, any sector, Mr. Speaker, that has 200,000 members is a significant institution. When you are in a country that is less than 300,000 souls. And such a significant number, I think that was the number that the Honourable Member for Christchurch East Central shared this morning. With such a large membership base, it is incumbent upon a government to make sure that there are protections in place for such a large number of persons. Now, you will be familiar with me having a certain love. I don't want to use the word affinity because that's the name of a credit union. So I say a certain love, even though it is a credit union that has a branch in St. Peter. So maybe I should be promoting it. But I have a certain love for protection. And I talk about protection and production quite often in this place. The Honourable Member for St. Michael South Central helped me to spawn that thought. But the protection that this bill offers is something that is necessary. The Honourable Member spoke about timing. I don't use statements like that to justify tardiness. And I feel that we have been tardy. But I do believe that it is better late than never. And so I throw my full support behind this bill that will protect the hard-earned savings of ordinary people, whether they're in Boscobel, Batalis, Black Bess, wherever in St. Peter they are. I am happy for legislation that will protect those persons. Now, the Barbados Labour Party's view about the cooperative sector generally, and credit unions in particular, is also borne out in something that we did in 2018. And the Honourable Member who piloted this bill would recall that in 2018, the Honourable Member for St. Michael South Central as well, in 2018, while we were addressing the disaster that was bequeathed to us by the Democratic Labour Party government, we recognized that a significant amount of the discussion would center around financial matters. And we made a decision in the social partnership that we could not address the matter of righting the wrongs of the Democratic Labour Party, of addressing the serious financial challenges that we had at the time, without having the credit union movement at the table. We made a decision that the people's institution, the people's financial institution, needed to be at the table just as commercial banks were at the table. And so in 2018, we invited the credit union movement to be a part of the social partnership, part of the discussion of matters, financial, economic matters that impacted on people. And that was another step in saying to Barbados, saying to the movement, but saying to the wider Barbados, that we are a party that recognizes the validity of people's institutions. We are not the party that feels that only business people and businesses should be at the table. But we also understand that the institutions that are spawned, that are created by the people of the country are valid enough, substantial enough, important enough to be at the table when important matters of national development, as a matter of fact, national survival, are on the table. And so the social partnership was expanded to include the credit union movement. Now, I wanted to join this debate because I heard the Honourable Member for Christchurch West talking about having 25,000 in a lot of different accounts. The people I represent are not those kinds of people. But I went to school with him. I know that those people exist. I know that those people exist. They do. I don't have a lot of them in St. Peter. I don't know if that's fortunate or unfortunate, but I joined this debate because the significant number of people in St. Peter who have 2,000, 5,000, 10,000, who've saved up. There's some parents who have 15, 20,000 who are hoping to be able to help their children to get a start. This bill now speaks directly to them. It speaks directly to them, Mr. Speaker, because before this, as a matter of fact, this only comes into effect after it is passed in the other place and proclaimed. But today, as we speak, the lady in Ben Hill who has $5,000 at Public Workers in Mulligan Quarter, if something happens, that $5,000 is lost. And the reason why it would be lost is because the credit union has its accounts with the commercial banks. The commercial banks are covered for up to $25,000 for the account. Now that account in the commercial bank includes the money of the lady in Ben Hill, but it also includes the money for the person in Tweedside Road, in Paterkin, in Bank Hall, in Bayland, all over Barbados. Now, I don't know how the $25,000 is going to be split up. The amount that is covered, how it's going to be split to allow each of those persons to get a few cents. Right now, those depositors at credit unions are exposed to some level of risk. I'm not saying that, Mr. Speaker, to cause any alarm, because I have a few dollars at a credit union, and I feel confident in that deposit at the credit union because I believe, based on everything I've seen over the last couple of decades, that the credit unions are well run. There are, however, in life, risk at every stage of life. Once you get off your bed, there's a risk. As a matter of fact, while you're laying down, there's also a risk. So I'm not saying that to alarm anybody, but to say that while depositors with commercial banks are covered individually, right now, deposits through the credit union are not covered individually. And the beauty of this, the reason why, as Member of Parliament for St. Peter, I have to stand to support this bill and to speak to the country to say that it is a bill whose time has come, is because my people are going to be protected. Their individual deposits in the credit union, Public Workers in Mulligan Quarter, Affinity in Speightstown, or wherever else in the credit union movement they are. Each of those accounts, each of those deposits will now be covered up to $25,000. That is what the people in my constituency sent me here to do, to protect them and to protect their small resources or their medium resources or their large resources. That is what we were sent here to do. We were sent here to protect the ordinary people of Barbados, the people who voted for us, those who did not vote for us, but those who live in this country and in our constituencies. We are now at the point where the people and their institutions are now seen on the same level as those of the commercial banks and those who have invested in the commercial banks. There's a matter that I want to speak to. I shared this sometime during last year with the Honourable Member for Christchurch East Central. A credit union is the people's institution. A credit union is also a commercial entity. That is to say, it has to be managed and led in a way that recognizes that it represents the investment of others. It is not an individual's personal money. That means that there are going to be certain costs associated with managing. When you have to discharge a fiduciary responsibility, there are certain costs. This insurance has a cost, because all insurance has costs. There are two things about this that I want to mention. One is that because it will be operating more like what is referred to as a captive, sometimes it is called self-insurance. It is the coming together, the pooling of premiums, so that if there is need to be a payout, that payout comes from that pooled pot of premiums that have been contributed to. But those premiums, the amounts that the credit unions will be paying, comes out of the revenue of the credit union. So it is a cost. It is a cost to the credit union. Now, the matter that I spoke to the honourable member who piloted this bill about was a concern that was voiced to me by a representative of a pretty small credit union. There was, and I believe there still is, a view that this bill and the matter of premiums, the cost of making sure that there's coverage, will disadvantage some of the smaller credit unions. I want the smaller credit unions not to see this as so much a challenge, but to see the need for every financial institution in this country to recognize that it has an obligation to protect the hard-earned funds of those who decide to put their funds, their money, in the institutions. And so, if an organization, a credit union, believes that in order to be able to fulfill the mandate of protecting the same ordinary people whose funds created the credit union movement and created the credit union, then it has to see that protection as important. It has to see that protection maybe as paramount. And I use that word deliberately. Paramount because I'm now establishing a hierarchy of responsibility. The people who have put their money into the institution to create the institution, those people need to be protected. I am not saying or suggesting that that protection should be at the expense of the overall organization. What I am saying is that what we have started to see is what may need to happen. And I am referring to credit unions coming together, determining that the best way to protect their depositors, the best way to protect their owners, and that is the fundamental difference between a credit union and a commercial bank. The depositors in the credit union are the owners. Some credit unions have determined that in order to protect their owners, their shareholders, it is better to pool their resources. Now, I have been assured, both by looking at the legislation, but also by the honourable member for Christchurch East Central, that amalgamating or amalgamation is not something that is mandatory. If the organization can handle the cost without having to pool with another similar, like-minded organization, then that is fine. I am raising this matter simply to say to the credit union movement, large and small credit unions, that we need to recognize that this is about protecting the shareholders, the owners, the ordinary people of this country who have put their faith in the organization and who have put their money where their mouths are. And on that matter, Mr. Speaker, government has also, or will also, be putting its money, which is also the people's money, where its mouth is at. And the honourable member spoke to the $1.7 million that government will put in up front to help to seed the insurance pool, to start off, to give a jump start to the insurance, to the insurance pool, to the captive. And so I believe that this investment this investment says to the people, or is another way of saying to the people of this country that we understand the role of the credit union movement, we recognize its importance, and we are prepared to allocate resources to make sure that the people of this country are protected. And this 1.7 million, Mr. Speaker, is a significant sum, but I believe that it is a sum well invested, particularly because it goes to protect the people of St. Peter, the people of Barbados, the ordinary people who have put their funds into these great institutions that we refer to as credit unions. I want to end, Mr. Speaker, by indicating that internationally, the credit union movement, because it represents cooperative action, is part of what is called the social and solidarity economy. That is how it is referred to at the International Labour Organization. Social and solidarity, because it refers to people, it refers to a system that does not put profit first, but puts the building of social capital, the building of individuals, the building of families first, the building of communities. The social and solidarity economy, Mr. Speaker, is, well, particularly at the International Labour Organization, is one that Barbados, and I will say the Barbados Labour Party, has had some level of influence in as well. I say to this House through you, Mr. Speaker, that in 2022, the International Labour Organization at its annual International Labour Conference debated the topic, decent work in the social and solidarity economy. In that discussion, that committee had 4 officers. 2 of those officers were from Barbados. The honourable member for St. George North and myself. The honourable member for St. George North was the worker spokesperson. I was the reporter for the committee. That committee, Mr. Speaker, came up with a definition for the social and solidarity economy. And I am happy that we were part of creating that definition, and to say to you that the following year, or maybe 2 years after, the United Nations General Assembly adopted that definition as the international definition for the social and solidarity economy. I end with that only to reinforce the point that I've been making earlier. This Barbados Labour Party, wherever it manifests itself, is fully committed to the cooperative sector, fully committed to the social and solidarity economy, fully committed to the credit unions of this country, fully committed to ensuring that those institutions developed by people, birthed by poor people in this country, institutions set up to formalize systems that we refer to, like I said earlier, as the SUSU and the meeting turn. These institutions of ordinary people are institutions that are seen as vitally important by this Barbados Labour Party government. The bill before us today protection of depositors is part of this party's vision for the movement. It is part of our understanding of how the movement can continue to develop. It is us saying in government that we support the people of this country. We support the risk that they take. We support their hard work and their propensity to save and to put aside their savings for a rainy day. We support it to the extent that we have come to this place to make sure that those hard-earned savings are protected. We have come to this place to say to Barbadians that we recognize that their institutions, our institutions, are no different and certainly no less than commercial banks in this country. We stand with the people. We stand with their institutions. And I commend this protection of depositors bill to this House and to this country. I'm obliged.
Ladies first. Honourable Mr. Michael South Central.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and to my honourable colleagues who are willing to give way at certain moments. Sir, I rise in full support of this bill, and I rise from the outset to provide through you, sir, a little bit of context in terms of the importance of this kind of action in the consciousness of a country like Barbados and a region such as ours. Sir, there is a story that is told about the abolition of the slave trade. There's a story that is told that suggests that at some point, planters and slave owners saw the light and had their consciences pricked by a newfound sense of morality that somehow appeared after centuries of enslavement of a people. Those of us in this part of the world, I hope, know better. Because the story that is told suggests that this was a human rights action. When we all know that, in fact, the slave trade was becoming less and less profitable. And that the industry that was held up by that slave trade was also starting to give way to new kinds of industry in which those owners of wealth and capital wanted to now get involved and to newly shift to. And so many of the dates that we come to commemorate with respect to the abolition of slavery and the slave trade actually relate to something else. They relate to the date on which slave owners were compensated for the losses that they incurred as a result of freeing the slaves. The losses that they incurred as a result of the fact that they would now experience financial loss from the fact that the world was now moving in a new direction, a new industrial direction. So if there are any young people whose history books might still be telling the incorrect story, let the record reflect in this honorable chamber that that is not at all the reason. It was not a human rights argument. It was a financial argument. And so the planters, the slave owners, were compensated at that time. And so when you hear the discussion about reparations, bound up in that is the fact that, in fact, those who suffered most from the slave trade, slaves and their descendants, were never considered losers in this, were never considered for compensation. Those who really stood least to be able to recover were never even considered human enough to be compensated. Sir, a few decades ago, when the World Trade Organization brought new rulings in the agriculture sector, that meant that many of the banana farmers, in particular in the Windward Islands, in this region, would see huge losses because their crops were now less protected, less valued, and were not able to fetch the price on global markets that they had previously been able to fetch. And when you couple that with the fact that many of their lands were undergoing a certain level of degradation, the farms were producing lower yields, when compensation was discussed, guess what? Again, it was compensation to the owners of farms. And of course, we wanted those owners of farms in the Caribbean to see compensation. But the workers on those farms, who had spent their entire lives, in some cases, working there and making those farms profitable, who themselves had some level of minor investment and a stake in the success of those farms, were not included in the compensatory regime. And so, sir, I start there to indicate that we have in this region a history of compensating the big people. We have in this region a history of acknowledging a certain kind of ownership, a certain provenance of ownership, ownership that comes from a certain place in the world, and ownership that looks a certain way. And we have not often considered something that this bill does now acknowledge. And I realize that the language is not new language, but the language is important because it is the protection of depositors. It is a protection of the people newly, by including the credit union system, that are losing the most and can least afford to lose what they stand to lose. It is now an indication of whom these kinds of regimes really need to target. And again, I feel as if Barbados, from this little place in this small region, is showing the world what it really looks like to build a financial system that protects people. It is not the first time in the last 8 years that we've had to show the world how to improve and strengthen financial systems, and it is a conversation that we continue to have. But such is the significance, sir, of this legislation. And as others have said before me, it serves to ensure that people with deposits of up to $25,000 in this instance, and by order that number may vary in the future, that those people are protected and that their savings and the goals of those savings, more importantly, are similarly protected. But sir, every time we come to this place, and often the member for Christchurch East Central is the one bringing financial legislation, and it sometimes sounds or seems like a new conversation, but it is not. And sir, since 2018, we worked as part of an economic team, he and I, along with the Prime Minister and other colleagues, to systematically take step by step, first, to put our own house in order, not just in terms of the quantum of resources, available for the protection of the country and getting the foreign reserves back in shape, but also the systems. And so I always say that you are doing nothing if you do not leave, whenever you leave, strengthen systems. And so there were steps that we had to take through the Central Bank Act, and I will come to that in a moment. There are steps that we had to take through the Financial Management and Audit Act. And now, having made sure that we, in some ways, make sure that our own house is in order with respect to public financial management, that we are also making sure that we partner with stakeholders that make up the financial system in this country to be able to strengthen that system. So whether it is through the Financial Management and Audit Act, which strengthens the governance of public finance, whether it is through the Financial Institutions Act, and I mention these things because sometimes we think that a single piece of legislation is meant to cover everything. But this, as I like to repeat, is part of a whole and is part of a system. So whether it is through the Public Financial Management and Audit Act or through the Financial Institutions Act, or through a recent amendment to the Central Bank Act of 2023, that again sought to improve the governance of the central bank in its regulation of commercial banks, but also made sure that it could take the necessary action that would be required for the Barbados Deposit Insurance Corporation to be able to meet its obligations under the Deposit Insurance Act. And those actions would be things like being able to lend to the corporation in times of a crisis, in times when the corporation referenced under the legislation before us that is responsible for the protection of depositors, to make sure that the corporation would be in a position to meet whatever obligations it would need to meet in a case where one of its institutions requires that kind of assistance. So to make more liquid, to provide cash so that the corporation can cover its obligations, the kinds of obligations that we're talking about here. And previously, that would have protected only people that are banking in commercial banks. Now, this allows for the extension of that coverage to those of us that are also clients of members of credit unions. Sir, I have the honor of having in St. Michael South Central one of the headquarters of one of the larger credit unions. They are a very good neighbor. But what strikes me whenever I go into the credit union is the extent to which people depend, and I will say to you that often you see among the people who have taken their ticket and are waiting to be seen, you see the sense of urgency for whatever is the matter that they're coming to resolve. You see the extent to which a yes or a no is going to mean everything on that day. And so when we talk about credit unions in Barbados, and when we talk about the $3 billion in deposits, that is not a small number, that they are holding and that they are, of which they're the stewards, we are talking about a very significant movement in this country. But significant not just because they hold certain very important decisions for working class communities and others in their hands, but important to the wellness of the financial sector. And the Honourable Member for Christchurch East Central talked about the issue of contagion in markets as small as these. The extent to which a whisper or a word or a suggestion of failure can sometimes be enough for a system to start to fail. It is the most amazing thing to observe. I had the the honor of serving on an expert advisory panel when the economies of Cyprus and Greece had their collapse. And doing that work in real time every day, you see how a single email that uses one word and not another, that says large failure versus, you see how quickly this thing can spread. And so in a region like this, first of all, in a country like this, and you know, I think the role of the Financial Services Commission and the extent to which they themselves are able to strengthen their own governance for supervision is going to become important. Because it becomes critical to all of us as actors in this system to make sure that we are closely managing the health of each of our financial institutions, sometimes institution by institution, case by case, because if there is ever a suggestion that there is a problem, then we know that this is a domino effect that can sometimes take hold, whether there is a problem or not. But sir, the credit union movement is also important to us as a tool and as an engine of economic enfranchisement in this country. And we have long had conversations with the sector about the fact that credit unions are perhaps better placed than commercial banks in some cases to be able to offer the kinds of instruments, to develop and offer the kinds of instruments to everyday Barbadians that we find that commercial banks are quite averse to. And I know that we've been in this conversation for some time, and whether it is how we approach the availability of mortgages for affordable housing, or it is how we approach setting up vehicles through which Barbadians can invest in companies or in projects for our own development. We have for some time, for example, talked about a project like a desalination plant. That is a development investment so that at once you are able to invest in something for which you and the country will see the immediate benefits in the way of increased and improved water supply in certain parts of the country. The bottom line is that, and I say, sir, all the time, and I believe the same is true for the member for Christchurch East Central, I certainly did not come to political service to preside over the consolidation of wealth among those who already have it. That would have happened without me. That would have happened without the member for Christchurch East Central. And whether it's Bank Hall or Haggett Hall, that's not why we came to do this work. We came to do this work so that people can move from a wage-based existence to an ownership-based basis for how they live and earn and are able to leave something for future generations. That is why I do this work. That is why this government is doing this work. And that is one of the things that this legislation helps us do. I do think that we need to go further, faster. And I say that to myself, as well as to the member for Christchurch East Central, and to the members from the credit union, to be able to actually establish these instruments and to be able to say, look, yes, you can come through this credit union and invest in this project, whether it is a hotel, whether it's a desalination plant, whether it is another area that is going to help us deal with the effects of the reality of living in this climate vulnerable region, whatever it is, that we have to move further and faster to make economic enfranchisement real. And I don't say that to anybody but us. I say that as a reminder to us that that is still our mandate. Sir, to the extent that the Financial Services Commission is now included as a relevant, competent authority to be able to arbitrate in these matters, to the extent that this legislation removes the need for a high court to make a decision before operations can be wrapped up, before payments can be made. This is important. And it is important for a reason that I don't like to admit. It is important because decisions still take too long to make their way out of the court system. And this is true for a number of matters, or a number of categories of matters. But it means that it affects the credibility of the financial system. It affects investor confidence, let us be frank. And it ties the hands of the Financial Services Commission or any other relevant authority to be able to act to protect depositors. Certainly, the lady that was referenced by the member for Christchurch West, who makes pudding and sauce on a Saturday, or the baker that he mentioned, can't wait 3 months to recover their money. And that's if you're lucky. Because the truth is that we know of matters, and sir, I know you know of matters, that for years have languished, and we have not seen a decision. And when, as somebody who has some responsibility with my colleague from St. Philip for investment, South, who has some interest in and responsibility for working with him in the investment space, this is one of the things that we hear. If I am involved in a financial matter in Barbados or in the region, and it has to come before the court, am I going to be able to get my resources out? Now, if we can't answer that creditably, then we have a problem. And while this problem is not solved in this legislation, what the legislation does, admirably, is to remove the need for that action to be settled before people can be protected. And it is an important consideration of this legislation. Sir, the Financial Services Commission is growing in its mandate. It is growing in its mandate in part because of the series of reforms that we have seen over the last 8 years. It is also growing in its mandate because of new international norms and standards. And the international financial reporting standards are newly updated and are going to mean that deposit-taking institutions, insurance companies, all institutions in the system are going to have to up their game. It means that similarly, the Financial Services Commission as regulator is going to have to up theirs. And I believe that standardization of communication, standardization of norms and expectations, greater predictability are things that the FSC can target as it improves its capacity to regulate institutions. There are things required of the institutions, and there are things required of the Financial Services Commission, so that regulated institution and regulator are on sound footing to be able to protect the system. The final word on this, sir, has to do with the broader role of insurance in development. And this kind of insurance that this bill strengthens and makes accessible to credit union depositors is key. But so, frankly, sir, are all the other kinds of insurance. One of the reasons that we continue to grapple with, and when I say we, I mean countries like Barbados and those that are on the front line of the climate crisis. One of the reasons that we continue to grapple with the financing side of the equation has to do with the penetration of insurance in a number of ways. Whether we're talking about reinsurance in agriculture, whether we're talking about home insurance in cases where there may be damage to homes as a result of severe weather events, penetration of insurance and the difference between these jurisdictions and others in countries like the US and the UK and other regions is that we suffer from the potential for wipeout risk, and I'll say briefly what I mean. Now, we've seen that in cases where there is a storm or a tornado or a similar event in the US, in a state or in part of a state, the coverage of insurance means that the insurance sector can respond. The insurance sector can respond because of the scale as a percentage of the overall land area or a percentage of the population. And the insurance sector can respond because of the penetration of insurance. People are insured for certain kinds of, for some reason they haven't managed to solve the health insurance, to make health available to all equation, but in key sectors people are insured. And in home ownership, people are largely insured. When you have a lower penetration of insurance, it means that the state now has to bear the cost of whatever is that event. And we have broached for some time the issue of how do we address the penetration, how many people are insured across a number of areas. Interestingly, we've had to have the conversation even with Social Security, because that is insurance. To be able to say to people, look, we understand that you are paying for something that may not happen. And that is a challenge. We understand that people often think, well, why am I putting money into this thing that I may never see a return from? But that is what you call managing your risk. And it is worth it in circumstances where the risk is changing and increasing and coming closer to home every time. And so I only make this point, sir, as we talk about deposit insurance, to turn our minds to the fact that we have to be able to solve the insurance issue across a range of areas. And when we hear reports about how many repairs have been able to be completed following a severe weather event, part of the challenge is the scale that the state has to bear. And if insurance is able to meet some of that, and is not going to be able to pack it away and call it an act of God, and we're not going to step forward because nobody could insure this scale of disaster. Whether it is through first loss insurance instruments or whether it is through other kinds of instruments, we need to solve the issue. It is not going away. And just like depositors need to be able to secure the money that they put on the credit union or put in a bank, homeowners need to be able to secure their investments. Farmers need to be able to secure their investments. All of us need to be able to make sure that we are managing the risk in our lives every day. Sir, against the tapestry of our collective history, as people who have, for generations of our foreparents, have owned nothing, have been protected by no one, this legislation is historic. It is critical. It is saying to institutions that represent the broad base of Barbadians. We see you. We are working with you such that we all trust our collective efforts to strengthen this financial system. And we are taking yet another step with you to make sure that the members that you so ably represent continue to be protected in their livelihoods, in their dreams, in their aspirations. And with those few words, sir, I commend this bill to this House.
Honourable Member St. James South.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I am grateful to have the opportunity to speak to this. It is a bill long in coming. We are very, very grateful that it is here. I want to sincerely congratulate the Ministry of Finance and to honor the credit unions that have worked so hard to support the development of this particular bill, to be able to give the protection to credit unions, credit union members that they so richly deserve. Much has been said of the power of this bill. For me, as an ordinary Barbadian, this is what it has meant for me. I remember when trade confirmers happened. My godmother lost significant monies in her savings because of it and caused her tremendous distress. The Clico debacle, I had family members who were hurt by this. And the funny thing about when things like this happens, when there is no protection for your savings, it is not just the immediate hit that you get, but it alters the security of your life for a significant time. Sometimes some people never, ever recover. And sir, because of that, and because of the fact that we have come from a colonial past where taking risk has always been something that was difficult for us, something that is ingrained coming out of that slave experience where taking a risk, if it did not work out, could cost you your life. So each generation trained the next generation not to take risks. And that has been passed from generation to generation, where as a people we struggle with the issue of investing monies. We struggle with even investing in a family member's business opportunity. Our savings are not available to actually grow the economy because people are fearful, and that issue of risk is a very real one. Hence, the emergence of credit unions is a testimony to the breaking of that ceiling, to destroying that barrier, to freeing the minds of Barbadians that, look, we can come together, we can trust ourselves, we can put monies together and use it for the benefit of our families, for our dreams, and for our country. And I remember having the privilege, Mr. Speaker, of being in the home where one of the largest credit unions first started, where the first discussion started, where a few people in a living room sitting on chairs and on a carpet said, why don't we start a credit union? And an idea born in a house there on 2 Mile Hill, and the discussion continuing in many other places, has led to one of the largest credit unions in this country. And therefore, the obvious fact that it should be protected, and all other credit unions, the monies of the ordinary persons in Barbados, is a no-brainer. And that is why I'm truly grateful that we have taken the time to put together a program of protection that allows the individual depositor, the individual shareholder in the credit union to have the same protection as is found in those big banks. Because the credit union has been a gift to ourselves, a testimony to our capacity to do big things when we do it together. Now, here's why I am extremely happy about this particular bill for protecting credit unions that will empower the BDIC to be able to do its job in protecting all depositors. The restoration of confidence in the financial system is important. As I shared when I started, we have come from a background where risk and fear of trusting each other is very, very real. And that has enormous implications for the capacity to invest in any nation. It means that a lot of funds that are accumulated are not available to move from savings into investment, to grow the economy, to grow new opportunities for the generations coming, to provide new jobs, to allow Barbadians to not only live in Barbados, but own a piece of the rock beyond having a piece of land to put a house on, that they can invest and create assets so that what we do is create a wealth-generating family. And every time, Mr. Speaker, that there is a crash of a financial institution, every time people do not do their duty in taking care of the organizations that hold our assets, what it does, it keeps destroying that very fragile level of trust that is being nurtured and built, has taken years, decades to do, can be destroyed overnight. And this is why this bill is so important. Now, I'm not going to be long today because I think that the message shared by all of the speakers has been important, and I'm hoping that it will be properly heard. What I see happening coming from out of something like this, if we're able to share it with the population, if we're able to help the ordinary person understand it. I'll explain why I say that. We are often in this Parliament passing legislation, and the importance to the ordinary person is not understood. They don't see it, they don't get it. And because we do so much work every week, bringing all of these different things, they cannot always track the pattern to see what is happening in terms of building a republic that is going to work for every single Barbadian. This is part of republic building. So here it is. We have a people who are sensitive to investment, sensitive to doing entrepreneurship, and who have from time to time had their trust shattered by the things we've already discussed. And so this government put in place financial literacy training to help to shape the thinking of the next generation of Barbadians, to help them have a different attitude towards money, towards investment, towards trust. And that financial literacy training is designed not only how to manage your everyday funds, but to encourage people to save something, to use the credit unions as a part of their savings program. But we want them to be able to take the next step, which is to look at potential investments where they can begin to multiply the wealth that is accumulated by their families. And so our financial literacy training would be at risk if we did not put this legislation in place to help expand confidence in the credit union movement, to expand confidence in our financial institutions. Once you blunt that, and you blunt investment, then entrepreneurship growth is not going to occur. Entrepreneurship requires that people have the confidence to put money in. And I think that one of the things I would want to encourage the credit unions to do, they may do so already, I don't know. I'm a member of the credit union, so if you've done it, it hasn't quite reached me, need to know. But one of the things that is needed is having programs, family discussions, where you teach families how to work together to build wealth using that credit union model, and demonstrating that the credit union has a protection around it now because of this bill, that people can have greater confidence in coming together and doing things together. This is important. One of the things that I listened to when the Honourable Member for Christchurch East Central was sharing, he was speaking about the fact that they were looking to raise the limit. I welcome that significantly. He also spoke of other issues that he wants to address and put in place to be able to empower the credit union to be able to do more. One of the areas I've always been concerned about is their capacity to invest in things that can bring money. I know that what we try to do is to protect them by saying they can't invest in this or invest in that because of the level of risk and, you know, the fact that they're holding monies belonging to regular, ordinary people who really can't afford to take that risk. But I would really like to see credit unions having an opportunity to invest in more things in Barbados, especially as we are talking about growing the economy. I'll give you an example. If we're going to, for example, set up a parking garage that would earn money in Bridgetown, I would love to see the credit unions being able to be a partner in that. We have, for example, the opportunity to get acres of land in Guyana and in Venezuela. But it would really take significant funds to start a commercial level agricultural product. I would love to see the credit unions partnering with government, where government puts the extra protection for the credit union, but is able to utilize those funds that are sitting in the bank, not just sitting in the bank, being lent out by the bank for the bank to make money. I would love to see them to be able to be involved in some of these national projects that would allow them to earn significantly from the opportunities that would be available in Barbados. I think of our plan for the development of the Bay Street area and so on. I would love for us to be able to identify low-level risk opportunities there for the credit union to be able to be involved in those types of investments, or work with a group of their shareholders to put some money into something that could work and bring forth some money. I think these things are important. And so, Mr. Speaker, I want to congratulate the Ministry of Finance. I want to congratulate the credit unions. I am very, very proud of the work that you have done. I have benefited from it. My family has benefited from it, and I want to encourage you to continue to do this tremendous work, but look at the next steps that need to be taken to be able to help Barbadians move to another level in their financial journey. I think that that is very important. And I want to thank you, Mr. Speaker, for the opportunity to just share those few thoughts.
Honourable Member for Christchurch East Central.
Thank you so very much, Mr. Speaker. I am heartened by the support of honourable members. Given I'm not surprised, obviously, given the nature of the intent of this bill. And as we work on the implementation and the practicalities of what is required for credit unions moving forward. Our commitment from BDIC, as well as in collaboration with the League, is to ensure that all members, certainly during the coming season with respect to how the boards will renew their governance, would have an opportunity to actively engage on this subject matter, and therefore the timing is very good in relation to enhancing that communication and educational program with respect to the members. And the truth is, sir, that this is a particularly transformational moment for the country, and I want to thank members for the perspective that they have shared and some concerns in the sense that we are correcting a matter that really should have never existed. And I think to the extent that we are in a position now, certainly fiscally stronger, the economy is growing, and therefore we want to put in this foundational stone further to enhance the strength of the credit union movement and to allow for the full participation in the economy, as I indicated earlier in my remarks. We will, as I said in my contribution, sir, once the BDIC has the relevant onboarding documentation and everything in place, we will be putting the 1.7 million into the fund to kickstart for the benefit of ordinary Barbadians, and we expect obviously participating institutions to start paying in their premiums such that the insurance level starts to ramp up to give adequate coverage. In the foreseeable future, we do not see we do not currently have any issues of concern with respect to any particular credit union, sir. We have been urging the inclusion of additional skills within the management as well as within the board for corporate governance perspectives, because we feel that as we are about to take off, we need to ensure that the movement is able to be very dynamic in an environment that obviously continues to change rapidly. And therefore, financially strong, we want them to get stronger. That's where the mergers and collaboration and the consolidation efforts can help with that strength. And I think where the adoption of technology, which they've already embarked upon, and we hope that the rest of the sector will be onboarded as soon as, so long as we have the necessary scale and solutions to deal with that, so that whilst I know that there are 2 of them currently on BIMPay, 3 actually on BIMPay, we want to see the rest of the sector be able to be onboarded so that their customers are not in any way disadvantaged. And so we want to provide choice. We want to give people options within which to be able to not just deposit their funds, but invest, and to know that it's relatively secure. And this piece of legislation, sir, allows us the opportunity to deliver that. So let me thank honourable members again for their contributions, and to say to Barbadians that this is just the start, and we will continue to engage in a very robust educational program, continued engagement with the League to ensure that everybody understands fully what this particular legislation means for them and how it benefits the entire country. And so with those very few words, sir, I beg to move that this bill be read a second time.
Beg to second that, sir.
Second time. All those honourable members in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg to move that the Honourable Member for St. George South be appointed Chairman of Committees for this afternoon.
And this is done in accordance with Standing Order 5.5.
Beg to second that, sir.
The question is that the Honourable Member for St. George South be elected temporary chairman. All those honourable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it. Your Honourable St. George South is elected temporary chairman of committees.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that you do not leave the chair and the House resolve itself into committee for further consideration of this bill.
Beg to second that, sir.
The question is that the Speaker do not leave the chair and the House resolve itself into committee for further consideration of this bill. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it. Come here.
This House is now in committee.
Permission to take the bill in parts.
Permission so granted.
Part 1, clauses 1 to 4.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that Part 1, clauses 1 to 4, stand part.
Beg to second.
The question is that clauses 1 to 4, Part 1, stand part. Part 1, clauses 1 to 4, stands part. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye. Aye. All those against, say no. I think the ayes have it.
Part 2, clauses 5 to 17.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that Part 2, clauses 5 to 17, stand part.
The question is that Part 2, clauses 5 to 17, stand part. All those honourable members in favour say aye. Aye. All those against say no. I think the ayes have it.
Part 3, sir, clauses 18 to 28.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that Part 3, clauses 18 to 28, stand part.
Beg to second that, sir.
The question is that Part 3, clauses 18 to 28, stand part. All those honourable members in favour say aye. Aye. All those against say no. Looks like the ayes have it.
Part 4, clause 29.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that Part 4, clause 29, stand part.
Beg to second that, sir.
The question is that Part 4, clause 29 stands part. All those members in favour say aye. Aye. All those against say no. Looks like the ayes have it.
Part 5, clauses 30 to 36.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that Part 5, clauses 30 to 36, stand part.
The question is...
Beg to second that, sir.
Thank you. The question is that Part 5, clauses 30 to 36 stand part. All those members in favour say aye. Aye. Those against say no. Seems like the ayes have it.
Part 6, clauses 37 to 41.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that Part 6, clauses 37 to 41, stand part.
Beg to second that, sir.
The question is that Part 6, clauses 7 to 41 stands part. All those honourable members in favour say aye. Aye. Those against say no. Looks like the ayes have it.
Part 7, clauses 42 to 54.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that Part 7, clauses 42 to 57, stand part. 54, stand part.
Thank you.
Beg to second.
The question is Part 7, clauses 42 to 54 stands part. All those honourable members in favour say aye. Aye. Those against say no. I think the ayes have it.
The schedule.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that the schedule be the schedule to the bill.
I beg to second that, sir.
The question is that the schedule be the schedule to the bill. All those members in favour say aye. Aye. All those against say no. Looks like the ayes have it.
Mr. Chairman, I do now beg that you report to His Honour the Speaker the passing of one bill in committee.
I beg to second that, sir.
The question is that I do now report to His Honor the Speaker the passing of one bill in committee. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those members against say no. I think the ayes have it.
The chairman of committees reports on the passing of one bill in committee. Honourable Member for Christchurch East Central.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that this bill be read a third time.
I beg to second that, sir.
The question is that this bill be read a third time. All those honourable members in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that this bill be now passed and cited as the Protection of Depositors Act 2026.
The question is that this bill be passed and so cited. All those honourable members in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it. This bill is passed and so cited. Honourable Leader of Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. With that, we've come to the end of today's sitting. I therefore beg to move the adjournment of the House until Tuesday, the 30th of June at 10 a.m.
Beg to second that, sir.
The question is that this honourable chairman be adjourned until Tuesday, the 30th day of June 2026 at 10 a.m. in the forenoon. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it. This honourable chairman stands adjourned until Tuesday, the 30th of June 2026 at 10 a.m. in the forenoon.